Hello and welcome to this webinar tonight for the Farm Advisory Service, or FAS. Tonight it's Are You Milking Your Environment? I'm Cara Campbell. I'm an agricultural consultant with SAC Consulting in the Campbelltown office, and I've been running this project this year. Tonight we have got Donal Sheenan from the Bride Project in Ireland, who is going to give us a bit of information about what they've been doing and what he does on his own farm as well. Okay, if you could move it forward, Helen. So just a bit of housekeeping about asking questions tonight. You will have I think it's along the bottom of your screen, bar where you can ask a question in the chat box or the Q&A box. And just to get started and so that everyone can have a go, could you just pop in the chat box how many people are watching this webinar in your house tonight, please? I'll just give you a second to do that. Right, I can see them coming in, so that's brilliant. So if you have any questions throughout the webinar tonight, if you can just pop them in the chat or the Q&A, and I'll be able to see them as they come in. We'll do questions at the end for Donal, but just pop them in as we go through. Yeah, and if you have any issues, just pop it in there, and Helen's working in the background so she can have a look and see what's happening. Okay, right, I will hand over to our speaker tonight, Donal.
Okay. Is that okay, Cara? Yeah,
I can see that.
Very good. Okay. Thanks very much, Cara. Thanks, Helen, for helping me to organise this, and thanks to the Farm Advisory Service and yourselves for the invitation. As Cara said, my name is Donal Sheenan, and I'm the project manager of the Bride Project, but actually, first and foremost, I'm a dairy farmer. I do everything else for my sins, and the Bride Project came about as a result of, I suppose I was always into wildlife conservation, and I was always keen on the nature aspect of farming, and I could see, as you yourselves could also, I'm sure, the declines that were happening and the changes that were taking place as we were getting more and more intense in the way we farmed. And it was just kind of, I compare it to death by 1,000 cuts. You know, this never happened overnight. It was over the years as we became more and more intense, and as there was a need to make ends meet, really. And, you know, farmers are getting a bad press because of all the, you know, the bad publicity about the environment. But really, I'm always saying farmers shouldn't beat themselves up over this, because this has gone all the ways back to the price of cheap food, etc., etc. So what I'm going to do this evening is give you a brief outline of the Bride Project and the way it works. It's what's called an EIP, so that's the European Innovation Partnership. So it was funded by the Department of Agriculture and the EU, and basically what they did was they gave out funding to try and sort out the problems that we're having with the environment. So our one deals with biodiversity and intensive farmland. Other EIP projects were about improving water quality, looking after upland farmers, looking after water quality or lowering carbon footprint. But as I said, ours was about improving biodiversity, but also making changes across the board, really, with regard to water quality and carbon sequestration as well. So it's as I said, it's an EIP, but we put in that tag farming with nature, because I'll show you that at the end. The Bride Project is just specifically for the Bride Valley. It's biodiversity regeneration in the dairying environment, BRID, and the Bride is you'll be disappointed to know it's nothing to do with getting a partner for life or anything like that. It's the Bride River here in Castlines, where I'm based, and these are the people that are in our operational group, Tagus, Glanbia, Birdwatch Ireland, and we have, these are all the people who you want on board, really, to to make this happen. You know, Glanbia and Keepack are the milk and the beef processors, respectively. Cork County Council is the local authority. Birdwatch Ireland is similar to RSPB in your country, and Board B is the food board. And if you want to make changes at farm level, these are the people we got involved, because these are the people that we need support from. So it's very important to know where this is. It's down in that red area down at the bottom, not the white area, it's the red area. Okay, so the first thing is, what we did is that there was 42 farmers, and there were a mix of dairy farmers, beef farmers, tillage farmers, equine, sheep farmers across the board. So we didn't focus on just dairying, even though it is a dairying environment. But when you're wanting to make improvements to biodiversity, previously with any agri-environment schemes, you know, I could be in an agri-environment scheme and I could be doing all the right things. And there could be someone else 4 or 5 miles away that's also in the agri-environment scheme and doing all the right things, but everyone in between may not be in it. And it's absolutely useless. One farmer will never improve the environment on their own. It needs to be a concerted effort by everyone, the farmers that are adjoining you as well as yourself. And it was basically really trying to get everyone singing off the same environmental hymn sheet. Yes, a farmer that has cereals will be farming differently to a farmer that has livestock, but ultimately, as far as the habitats is concerned, and that's what we focus on, the habitats, the areas like hedgerows, ponds, wetland, scrub, all the areas that up to now were called waste ground or you know, whatever other term you use, land that had no value. We wanted to put a value on it. So what we did was we mapped. This is a farm on the River Bride. The purple area is the River Bride here. These are all the fields. The yellow is the hedgerows. There's a dotted red line there. They're the field margins. The field margin is the area joining the hedgerow. So we mapped all of these farms and we gave them a percentage. So this figure here, 8.35, 8.35% of this farm is in what we call BMA, biodiversity managed area, or in simple terms, it's the space for nature. And our aim is to get every farm up to 10%. That's the Green Deal, that's the biodiversity strategy. It's the farm to fork strategy, where every farm in the EU would have 10% of their area devoted to nature. And these are the areas that were mapped out. In this instance, he had 1,479 square meters of a water course or a drain. The farmyard we also gave a value to. 8,169 square meters was a field margin, etc., etc. So it's 5.09 hectares out of the total farm area, which was 52, was in space for nature, and that's 8.35%. And the whole idea is to get them up to 10, and also to improve the quality of that 10%. So these are the capital measures. So putting in a biodiversity plot, which is just wild bird cover, a bee scrape, improving the quality of the farmyard, and we gave €2,000 per farm to improve all of these measures here, to either add to a farm or to improve the quality. So, you know, excavating a pond, you got €450. Putting in multi-species grassland, you got 475. And the whole idea here, we did not ever pay 100%, because we wanted the farmer to come a bit of the ways with us. And I think farmers need to get that. Unfortunately, we've all kind of come to on this journey with a lot of these measures are paid for. And it actually gave us a bad habit, because we feel now as farmers that we won't do anything unless we're paid for it. But in my opinion, yes, the government needs to support farmers, but the farmers need to start investing in the nature part of their farm, the same as they put up a new milking parlour or build a new shed or put in new facilities. And not to the same extent, obviously, because you know, a milking parlour or any kind of facility is a lot more expensive. But there does need to be some investment from the farm. This is your story that you can tell to the people that are buying your food, and you need to invest in that story. So this is really intensive grassland. As you can see here, though, there's very little. SFN is the space for nature, so that there's there's no space for nature here really. This is just a monocultural ryegrass sward, and this is similar to a lot of my farms like this, where there's very little here. This is you know, you go back 50 or 100 years, and this would be all covered in wildflowers. A lot of the ground nesting species that are now gone, like skylark and corncrake, it would have been full of those. But now, you know, there's 200 or 300 cows going in here. There's machinery, there's sprayers, etc., and there's no space for nature. And this is the EU Green Deal strategy. And this green slice of the pie, it's 10%. And this is the area of intensive farming, 90%. And this is the most important word here is minimum, because this is the area that's cleaning your water. It's the area that's providing biodiversity. It's the area that's providing a visual landscape for you or your community. It's the area that's drawing down carbon. And yet it's just such a small piece of the pie. And we're in a lot of instances, we're down at 5, 4, 5, 6%. And we're trying to bring everyone up to the 10%. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a farm, and I'm just going to try and show you how that might work. So this is the farm boundary here, and this is actually one of our farms that we did in the Bright project, and this is how we improved it. So first of all, you take the hedgerows, and they come to 4,560 square meters. So, you know, most farms, all farms have some hedgerows. So when you, we have a mapping tool now that'll decide all this area for us. So that's 4,500 square meters straight away, without doing anything. And I'm very conscious of farmers and their cropping area, whether it's grass or cereals, and you know, not taking land from the cropping area, but in some instances we'll have to. And this is the kind of a hedgerow you want, not shaved to the bone, that might look lovely to us, but really a lush hedgerow that's plenty of blossom on it in May and June, a lovely visual aspect to it for people that are not farming, loads there for pollinators, loads of foliage for drawing down carbon, and that's what a good hedge should look like. That's the quality. This is what you don't want, where, yeah, it looks good from a human point of view if that's the way you have your farm, and that's a kind of a mindset change that we all need to look at. But really, there won't be any blossom in that hedge for 2 or 3 years, and then it's cut back down again. So you're really, it's just, hedgerows have a different function now. Then you add a field margin. So the field margin is the area beside the hedgerow, and we look for 2 meters outside the hedgerow, and farmers won't give 2 meters outside all their hedgerows, but they have taken out bits and pieces here, 2 meters here, 2 meters there. And if you do all of it, that comes to 6,076 square meters. This is the field margin. That's a kind of a field margin that you're looking for. So the fence is out 2 meters, and if it's a tillage farm, you don't need a fence, but you want your 2 meters out here from the base of the hedge. And that's where you'll get your pollinators for when you have wildflowers, your small mammals, and nesting birds like yellowhammer, stonechat and things will nest in the base of that hedge, in the thick undergrowth, in the field margin. So that's the kind of a quality you're looking for there. This is what you don't want. We're trying to get away from this, and we have it's a hard sell now, trying to get farmers to get away from using herbicides on the field margin. But you know, farmers keep telling us that you know, they have to spray the hedge to keep the foliage off the electric fence wire, but you don't. What you need to do is bring the wire out, and the management of that habitat is flailing it every year with your hedge cutter. So you do the side of the hedge. You don't cut the top of it, but you flail this area here as well, and then you bring out the wire so that you don't have to. There won't be any foliage on it then if you flail it every year, and you're providing a fantastic habitat in there for wildlife. So then you can here's down on the bottom. There was a tree line put in. There's 60 trees gone in, and you know, we haven't taken a whole lot now yet off of the middle of the field. So there's 60 trees gone in, and that's 415 square meters. That's what it might look like in years to come when they'll grow. And again, that's getting back to the visual aspect. Then up here, we have some wild bird cover. So there was over 4,500 square meters put into wild bird cover. And yeah, the Bride project was paying for this. And it is gone off of your, in this instance, was a grazing area. But still, there's still plenty out here. But this is to get you up to your 10%. So this was just a plot of pollinating seed for wildflowers in the summertime, and then in the wintertime there's plants like linseed and mustard that are there for the winter for wild birds to feed on. And that's what that plot looks like in the summertime. It's really a beautiful mixture, and it kind of does your head good to go up and see a plot like that. As well as the wildlife, it's good to have to be able to look at something like that. A skylark plot. This is if you want to talk about improving biodiversity, having nice hedgerows is one thing, but really and truly, where all the biodiversity is going, or the most of it, is in the ground rather than the hedgerows. And it's the ground nesting species that are really in trouble. So this was it's 3 acres that were put into a kind of a skylark plot, is what we call it. Basically, it's a mix of different grass species and different wildflowers. It's basically bringing back hay meadows, and that's the structure of that is what's important. And I'll focus after about the results-based payment and how to get the right structure. But for the species to come back, they don't need, actually, if it's a hay meadow, it's gone too strong. And skylarks in particular, which is our it's our project bird, if you like. For them to come back, and they're only on 2 of the farms, they need a special structure where cattle graze it early on in the year, and they're allowed, the chicks are able to feed in when the sward is low. So skylarks have evolved side by side with dairy cows or any kind of stock to feed their young over the years. It's just that it's got so intensive now they've almost gone. So that's the skylark. So you're trying to have that bird compatible with your farming system, which is difficult. That's what it's competing with. And that's what it's competing with. So unless we give a special management plan to any farmer that has any of these species, so that they can manage it, just the field that they're in. So there was 2 ponds put in. There was one down here, was a wet area, and there was another wet area here. And they added 200 square meters, and ponds are fantastic for biodiversity. And you have something like that, which is, again, good for your head. There was a tree line here, and this was fenced off, and in between the trees and the fenced area, there was rough grassland. And small mammals like bankvoles and shrews, etc., are dependent on rough grassland. And these are the birds that are dependent on the bankvoles and the shrews, etc. So if you don't have rough grassland, you won't have bankvoles and shrews. If you don't have bankvoles and shrews, you won't have these 3, kestrels, barn owls, and hen harriers. And that's really the whole key to biodiversity. You take out one thing, and the whole thing falls. That's the way it is. You mightn't like some aspects of biodiversity. You mightn't want rodents, rats or mice or whatever, but you take them out, and these guys are gone. So here there was an old quarry. There was I think there was 250 mixed woodland put in, native species of trees, mostly oak. That contributed 320 square meters. And down here there was it was a natural wet area, and that was just fenced off and allowed back to nature, and that was giving 5,000 square meters. And this is a big area, and this is a big area, but you must remember these 2 areas have to be grazed. If they're not grazed, and you might say, I'll just leave them go to nature, they'll just go to scrub, and you lose the biodiversity in them. And that's very important to comprehend, that unless you manage these, you lose biodiversity really. Grazing management is a key aspect to grasslands, natural grasslands, I suppose I should say. This is wet grassland, and again, if you don't have wet grassland, you won't have curlews. And so you try and put a value on this. This is curlew habitat, and you try and put a value on that. That's what the project tries to do. And if a farmer has an area like that, we ask them not to drain it. And there's also a target species payment for there's about 9 or 10 species that are in trouble. So any farmer that has one of those species, they get a target payment. So that brings you up to 29,426 square meters, which is 2.94 hectares, and that's your 10%. So I don't know whether that's whether you'd be prepared to forfeit that out of your ground, but that's 10%. And like I said, this area here and this area here need grazing management, so you're getting some bit back. To add to the quality, then we have bee scrapes, these little bee signs here. So what they are is just simply scrape in the hedgerow, south-facing bank, and these are solitary bees, and they're brilliant pollinators, and that's all they're looking for, some bare ground. And each of our farmers has to do 3 of those on the farm, and all they do really is go with a shovel and scrape off the bank to start of the year, and that's more or less it. Then nettle patches, this one really gets a laugh, because you know, when you're asking farmers to plant nettle patches, when over the last 100 years they're trying to take the bloody things out, and they were being told you need to spray them off. But again, it's getting back to the story about biodiversity. If you nettles are the food plant for 5 different species of butterflies, and if you don't have nettles, you won't have those species of butterflies. They totally depend on nettles to hatch their young. They lay the eggs on the nettle, and the caterpillars hatch out. And so if you don't have nettle patches, and it has to be out in the middle of the field, we discovered that if all the farmers were saying, oh, we've loads of them down side by the hedge. And I said, no, good lads, because they don't work in the hedge. I'd say it's something to do with predation and maybe not getting enough sun. But all we're looking for is about 2 meters by 2 meters in the middle of a field, 2 patches of nettles. And to kind of get the point across about how difficult it is for farmers, there was one fella came up to me. They were all complaining the night we said this, but they grudgingly went with it. But there was one fella rang me the day after, and he's been what I consider, you know, really, if we get to this farmer, or we get to anyone. And he said, look, he said, I've been thinking about that nettle patch. He said, and yeah, I'll do it all right. But he said, I'm not doing it by the field, by the road. There's no way, I can't have the neighbours looking in off the ditch. And the other thing he said was, whatever you do, don't tell the old fella. And you can see the mindset that we all have, because we were born and bred and brought up, you know, spraying nettles, spraying thistles, cutting back hedgerows, etc., etc. So a lot of this is more a mindset problem than anything else. It's just changing your mindset, changing the way you farm, and improving the quality of nature on your farm. So there are peacock butterfly caterpillars found on the nettle, just to prove that it works. The pollinator plot really was just, we got some native wildflowers and asked farmers to do 100 meters by 2 meters. It's just to improve the field margin, the quality of the field margin. And that's a pollinator plot. But they're difficult because what we're doing here in this situation is we're planting wildflowers in a space where it's difficult for them to survive. We're trying to replicate what should be out here in the middle of a field. You know, go back 100 years, like I mentioned already. This area would have been, you know, full of wildflowers and not too many cattle. Now it's full of cattle or cereal crops or whatever, and no wildflowers. So it's trying to get back a small bit of balance, and that's the result. So the other thing, what we've done is we've funded some farmers who want to put in multi-species grassland. I'm not sure if you're familiar with multi-species grassland, but it's just a different, it's a grassland sward that has 6 or 7 different species of grass and several herb species as well, like red and white clover, chicory, plantain, and the idea being that the more species you have, the more resilient the sward will be. That if you get, you know, bad droughts or loads of wet weather, that the more species you have, the better chance it has of surviving, rather than just putting one species in, which is what we've been doing for the last 20 or 30 years. So again, it's in a multi-species sward, you'll be able to cut back your nitrogen use by a lot, because it'll be predominantly clover. So that's the idea, and getting away from using artificial fertilizers. And that's your multi-species sward. You can see the chicory there in the foreground. That's yarrow, and there's red clover. There's also white clover, and there's several different species of the plantain. That's seedhead there in front. And it's a totally different sward than what you'd normally be looking at, which is just one species. And I remember there was a girl came down to look at she was doing a feature on the project last year, and she was involved in doing ads, television ads, and we have an ad on Irish television for Kerrygold butter, and she was telling me how she was involved in that ad, and where they had to go to this farm where there was lovely rolling hills and lovely long grass, and the grass was all uniform. And when you look at the ad, it's really beautiful. The grass is swaying in the wind, and it's all, you know, about 7 or 8 inches tall, and it's blowing in the wind, and you can see it for miles. But there would be no biodiversity in it, because it's just the one species. And I was showing her this, and she said you wouldn't sell much Kerrygold butter or looking at that. No, she said. So again, it's the mindset of the public that needs to change as much as anyone else. So I'm just going to focus now on the results-based payments, the way the Brighted project operates. So as I said already, we give €2,000 per farm for capital measures, and that's a once-off. And on top of that, then every year we go out and we score all the habitats on the farm: the hedgerows, the woodland, the ponds, the riparian buffer strip, the field margins, and we give them a quality score. And the score is based on the quality of those habitats, and they get that annually for 4 years until the end of the project in 2023. This is a previous agri-environment scheme, and if you look at this, in previous agri-environment schemes, the way they operated was you were told to buy bird boxes and put up bird boxes. So in this picture here, you've 14 or 15 bird boxes. This is what he was told to do, and he put up the bird boxes. But there's no bird going to go into them because they're in the wrong place. They're totally open to predators. There are different heights, and as well as that, some species are territorial. So if there's one bird goes into it, there's no other bird going to go into the other 2 boxes. And the farmer did everything right. He bought the boxes and he put them up. And that was it. And he sent in the invoice and he got paid. But the result was very poor. There was no species took it up, and it's absolutely useless. So the results-based payment, you get nothing for this because they're on the wrong location, they're for the wrong species. So you wouldn't get paid. So this is how our results-based payment scorecard works. And this is for farmyard. So it's the number of bird boxes erected in a suitable location. So if it's 2+, which is what we gave them, 2 boxes. So if they're put up in the right location, they get 20 marks. This is a total score of 100. If they're suitably maintained and they're not left, get run down, they get another 20 marks. Number of bat boxes erected in a suitable location, 20 marks for that. And again, if it's not in a suitable location, or if there's only 1, you get a half mark. If they're not in a suitable location, you get no marks. And then the third aspect of it is if you're rodenticide free, you get 40 marks. So that'll give you a total of 100. So it's actually quite easy to get 100% for your score for your farmyard. That's all you have to do. Have it suitable for 2 species of birds, which is usually a sparrow and a starling. It could be a barn owl if the farmyard was suitable and free from rodenticide. Again, that's the result of a good hedgerow, and this is what we'll be looking at. So was it last topped 1 year ago? 1 to 4 years ago or 5 years plus. So if it's 5 years plus, and when the assessors go out, you can see by the white thorns whether it was over 5 years ago, whether it was 1 to 4, or whether it was only last year. And again, if it was only last year, you only get 10 marks. So if there's a lot of gaps, we allow some gaps because we don't want to be kind of penny pinching. You get a further 20, so you're up to 80. If it's free from disturbance, you get another 10 marks, and you go down to disturbance to see what that means. So if there's pesticide on it, it's an auto fail. If there's dumping or spoil on it, it's an auto fail. An auto fail is no payment. Or if there's livestock access to the hedge and it's damaged, it's an auto fail. So these are the signals that we want to send out to farmers as to what way we want them to manage their hedgerows. And they've only actually, in the last 2 weeks, they got out the results of this. And it's interesting now, the feedback we're getting, because you never told us anything about that. I said, we did. We sent out the scorecards. You got the scorecards. And of course, they got the scorecards, all right, but they're somewhere in their computer 6 months ago as an unopened attachment. But they're being opened this week. And again, that's just typical farmers, and I'm one myself. Yeah, you won't bother doing anything until you're forced to do it. Invasive species is just it's a small negative mark because it's a bigger problem than, it's not a farmer related problem really. It's usually not their fault, so we don't penalize them severely for it. But again, that's the scorecard that we have for hedgerows. That's your biodiversity plot, and this is the scorecard. So if the cover of sown species present, so if there's greater than 80%, you get half the marks. So in other words, if you put out 10 kilos of seed mix on an acre or whatever, and there's 80% of it is established, which allows you 20% of a loss, you get half the marks. Then you get a further 20 if it's 0.1 of a hectare at the minimum, and if it's not 0.1 of a hectare, it's an auto fail. Free from disturbance, you go down to disturbance, and it's similar. If there's pesticide on it, because you don't want pesticide on a biodiversity plot. If there's machinery disturbance, if there's dumping or spoil, or if there's livestock access, this is a habitat for biodiversity. So you don't want any of these disturbance issues. And then cover of negative indicators is just if it's greater than 50%, you don't have a biodiversity plot. For whatever reason, if there's bramble allowed to come out onto it, that would take a couple of years, obviously. Or if it was, if it wasn't set right and there was all grass in it, it's what's called an auto fail. And that's the spring assessment. We come back in the spring and make sure that it was there all during the winter, because it is primarily a winter habitat for small birds. And what it's actually, the reason we have a biodiversity plot in the first place is that this is stubble ground that's sprayed off, and this is what the biodiversity plot is replacing. Stubble ground in cereals is hugely valuable for an awful lot of bird species, as well as soaking up nutrients during the winter, during heavy rainfall. It provides cover and food sources for a lot of birds, and so this is no good for biodiversity, whereas actually this is really very valuable. And it's one of our habitats, and that's how we score it. That if there's green cover in it, over 90%, greater than 90% green cover, you get top marks. And then livestock access, burning, slurry application, etc., they're all auto fails. I won't go through this. This is our payment calculator, but the thing maybe to look at here, and this is more for policymakers than farmers. This is the extra ground, the additional BMA is your biodiversity managed area. And that's what they had at the start. This farmer had 0.879 hectares of field margin, 2.23% of the farm. And he took out one hedgerow, which increased it by 0.06%. And that's very typical. The most we got for any farmer to kind of add to their space for nature, I suppose is what we'll call it, was 0.4 of a hectare. And you have to remember, and as farmers, I know I'm speaking to the converted, but farmers, their income comes from the cropping area of the farm. And it's very difficult, and I knew this was going to happen as a farmer. I knew it would be very difficult for myself, is to take out land from a cropping area where you get your income, whether it's grass or whether it's cereals, and convert it to oak woodland, where the Bride project are paying for 2 years, but after that, you don't know what's going to happen. That is a real issue. It's a real issue. Farmers need a continuous income stream, in my opinion, from the government, so that these habitats that there's a payment for these habitats indefinitely. I don't know what the payment should be. That's not for me to say, but it should be there, because only then will you see farmers appreciating it more, because there's a value on it. And it's just interesting. 0.12 is what this farmer took out altogether. 0.3% of his farm. And again, if that was 1 hectare, that 1 hectare is gone. If he converts that to an oak woodland, it's gone forever. It'll be gone for 100 years anyway. Otherwise, they can put it in and they'll take it out when the Bride project is finished, which is defeating the purpose. So I think that would be, that's for policymakers rather than farmers. So I'm finishing up now. If any of you are falling asleep, I hope I'm not. The way, I'm not going to focus too much on this either, but the higher or the lower your BMA, your space for nature, so at 0 to 6%, your payment start at €100 per hectare. When you go up to 7 to 10%, which is where most farmers are at, you get €200 per hectare. When you're 11 to 14%, you get 250, and the higher you are, 15% plus, then it's 300. And there's a cap, obviously, because we have a budget. But we incentivize farmers to get out of the low payments all the time. And the higher up they go, the payments increase. This is the payment slip that a farmer gets. So this is the baseline BMA, the biodiversity managed area, the space for nature. He started off with 6.186 hectares, which is 15.69%. The additional BMA, which is I just spoke about, 0.12 hectares is what he gave to nature, the extra space for nature. But he was already quite high. Which is 0.3%, giving him a total of 6.3, which is nearly 16%. And that's the figure down here. The Farmland Biodiversity Index is 16. So that's 16% of the farm is in space for nature. So that's the quantity. Then he started off with 4 habitats, but he put in bee scrapes, he put in nettle patches, he did pond. So he went up to 8. And when you go to 8+ habitats, you get an extra payment. He had a target habitat as well. So if you have a woodland, a pond, wet grassland, species-rich grassland, these are all important habitats. You get a bonus payment of €50, which is paltry, but all we wanted to do with our template was acknowledge that this was an important habitat and give the signal to the farmer that it was an important habitat. And so that's the payment that the farmer gets, 1892 for quantity, for his 16%, and 1260 is the quality. The quality was based on the previous slide where we, maybe I should have mentioned that, but all of the scorecards, it's a 0 to 100%. You get 40, 60, 80, 90% is your quality score. So in this instance, it was a B, which is 70 to 80%. So the quality is quite good across all the habitats, and the quantity was quite good. And that's his total payment. He didn't have any target species, so he gets no payment there. He did have 3 target habitats, and he did have 8+ habitats. So these are all the incentives and the signals were given out. Then they get their Farming with Nature certificate, which is just saying exactly what I've been speaking to you about already. And at this stage now, we've got further funding where we're able to do all of what I've just been talking about. We have a tablet now, and we're able to do it on a tablet, because it's pure torture for the last 2 years. We were going out with 30 or 40 pages and pencils and biros and so on and so forth, and losing half the pages and trying to figure out where we were on the farm. The whole farm now is on this tablet. It's part of an app. It's the Farming with Nature app, and we're able to score it on the tablet and be able to do it a lot quicker. And the whole idea is that in the last year of the project, that the farmers themselves would be trained to do this themselves. that they'd have this on their mobile phone, and that they'd be able to score their own farms. And it won't differentiate hugely. Once we've been out and once we've it mapped, it can't differentiate hugely. And if it does, we know that there's something wrong. And you know, you're not going to see farmers taking out 30 or 40% of their farm and putting it into nature. And likewise, the quality scores, the scorecards are designed so that you know, if you cut your hedgerow this year, you know, short back and sides, that isn't going to go into a good payment for at least 3 or 4 years. So the scores aren't going to change hugely from one end of the year to the next, or from 1 year to the next, I should say. This is our logo, the Farming with Nature logo. So we're at present liaising with a meat processor, Keepack, where they're trying to put a beef range next year, hopefully, on a counter in a supermarket. And the idea is that a farmer who's certified, it's a standard that we're trying to create, and any farmer that's farming with nature, they will have a minimum of 10% of their land in space for nature. And the consumer who will buy that product, there's a margin will go back to that farmer for having that certification. So there'll be a continuous incentive. If the Bride project finishes up, and it will in 2023, that at least this should be a continuous incentive, small all the time, but every time you send an animal to the factory, and if you're certified farming with nature, you should be getting a margin back, rewarding you for that. That's what's not there at the moment. At the moment, we are focused on producing as much as possible, and that's what's causing all the damage. Until there's an incentive coming from the consumer back to the farmer to say, thanks very much, we appreciate what you're doing, and some of that margin is for you. And until that happens, the pressure will always be on the environment. So thank you very much. I hope everybody is still awake, and I hope that was of benefit to you. So thanks, Cara. I'm not sure if I went over time or not.
No, that was brilliant. Thank you very much. Right, we've got a couple of questions that have come in while you were talking. So we'll go straight to them. So the first one, are we running the risk of putting off tourists from appreciating the beauty of our stunning countryside if they can't see the scenery from their car, bus or train because of the high hedges?
No, I wouldn't agree, because when you come around the corner, whether you have high hedgerows or not, there's some places you're going to get a view and some places you're not. And if you're driving your car, you shouldn't be looking in over the hedge. But I suppose that kind of might be a smart answer. But no, that question's been asked before, and I suppose really in the present, you know, you're close to COP26 there, and you know, in the present climate, one farmer said it to me. I'll put it this way now, and he said, I asked him, lads, why do you cut your hedgerows? You know, the short back and sides, and they were all kind of stunned because they didn't have an answer. And one fella piped up, because I like doing it. And I said, no, it's not a good enough reason. There's better reasons to leave it grow. And yeah, for a stretch of road, if the hedge is high, you might just not get that view, but then you'll come around the corner and it'll open up in front of you regardless of hedgerows. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that's great. Just a reminder, you can pop your questions in the chat or the question and answer, and then I'll be able to see them. Okay, so just kind of following on from that question, what about the hedgerows that are on the roadside? Do you get less points if you're managing the roadside of the hedgerow and leaving the field side to grow?
Yes, so what we say, Cara, is the hedgerow by the road is scored exactly the same way as the hedgerow anywhere else, because it would get too complicated otherwise. And the recommended management for the hedgerow by the road is the same as what it is in the field. You side trim, and you let it grow high. If there's you know, if there's visibility issues or health and safety issues coming out in entrance, obviously, but really and truly, you see some stretches of road and you know, they're just 3 or 4 feet high, and there isn't any need for it, like, you know. So you obviously keep them side trimmed because you don't want lorries and tractors with expensive murals having to be replaced or cars getting scratched. But other than that, there's so much roadside hedgerow. It would be, if everyone was cut short back and sides, there's an awful lot of carbon not being drawn down there, as well as the visual aspect of it and all the other aspects that I spoke about.
Brilliant, thank you. How many farms have you got involved in the Bride project, and how responsive were farmers to making the changes to improve biodiversity?
Okay, so 42 and slow. They got their results-based payments this week, the last 2 weeks. And even though we're up and running now since 2018, but it was kind of 2019 really before we kind of engaged with them fully. I actually think that, because I know this will happen, because I know the way they're ringing me up and asking why they auto-failed or why they did a bit poorly in this. It's only now when they get their quality scores that the changes will really happen, because nobody wants to be a D or an E, and nobody wants to be down at the bottom of the class. And the guidelines are there. We actually have a habitat management guidelines book, and it's free to download on our website if anyone wants to. It's really beneficial. Well, so our farmers tell us anyway. Yeah, it's slow. It's a mindset. It's really changing the mindset. It's very difficult. It's human nature. You're doing things for 40 or 50 years, and suddenly someone says, "Yeah, that's not right anymore, lads." And it just takes a while to convince you, first of all, and then to actually make the change then secondly. But they are making changes now, a lot of them, and big changes too, to be fair.
Brilliant. Right, I've got another question in the chat box. So are the scorecards farm specific? For example, we would have some hedges cut every year to keep them very dense, which is an ideal habitat for yellow hammer birds, one of our red list birds.
So we don't really go into the difference between our scorecards and other projects that have results-based payments is we did away with a lot of the complexity. So a lot of scorecards are based on indicators. For instance, if you had an indicator-based scorecard for hedgerows, the assessor would be going out and he'd have to stick his nose into every hedgerow and find out how many species was in there. And then a farmer with 7 species would get more of a payment than a farmer with 6 species. And, it's not practical. What had actually happened there is the assessor would get all the money because it would take so long to assess it. There'd be nothing left for the farmer and the environment. And being a farmer, I was very focused on that, on making sure that the farmer was going to get paid, because ultimately if the farmer is paid, the environment gets paid. And so we wanted to focus on getting an assessment done very quickly, and not taking all day. So if there's gaps in a hedge, I don't really bother too much about it, because there'll be plenty of room then for maybe wildflowers where there's a bit of shade to get in. And it's just trying to get it done as quickly as possible. If you're looking at a hedge and there's a gap here and there's a gap here and there's another gap over there, you're kind of, is that 10% gaps? Is it 20% gaps? And we didn't have this scorecard initially. And then we had actually opaqueness. Imagine that, having the level of opaqueness. We had to find out what it was first. It's actually the level of light that's coming through the hedge. Can you imagine trying to score for that? So we stripped all this off and we simplified it down to the last. That was really functional and practical. So getting back to the yellowhammers, we have one farm, a tillage farm, and there was 18 pairs of yellowhammers on it. And there was no field margins, and the hedges were pretty shaved. They were like we always would have done. And we're kind of recommending to that farmer now to 2 meter field margin, which will definitely, I think, improve the habitat for yellowhammers. But I'm kind of waiting to see if the hedgerows, if the tall hedgerows will be not beneficial, if you know what I mean, for yellowhammers. But I think if you have a wide field margin, that's what a yellowhammer needs, rather than a thick hedge. They actually nest in the first, I think, is the first 2 feet, and I wouldn't could be wrong here now, but I'm not sure I'd agree with the, having a real thick hedge being beneficial. We're focused so much on a thick hedge because it was, for years and years, hedges were made for stock proofing. I keep telling farmers that the days for stock-proof hedges are gone. We have an electric fence now system. So the hedgerows now are purely for biodiversity, in my opinion, and landscape value, etc. So I don't really focus too much on whether they're thick or not, because once they're left to nature, nature will find some niche in there for, if it isn't yellow hammers, to be something else.
Yeah, brilliant. Right, I've got a couple of questions about how to start some of these biodiversity things off. So what varieties would you plant when establishing a new hedgerow? As
many as possible. When we started out, we went to the nurseries, and we were, again, if you go on to our website and get that Bright Management the Habitat Management Guidelines book, all the full list of hedgerow species is in it, and we recommend a minimum of 6 species. And as I said, the nurseries, when we went to get the plants, all they'd give us was whitethorn and blackthorn, because that's what they had. They grew fast and they were easy, and they all had them in stock. When we started looking for Guelder Rose and Spindle and Holly, they started kicking up. They said that nobody wanted them, and the more diverse species of plant you can have in a hedge, the more species that you'll have in the hedge afterwards. So 6 or 7 minimum. The more you can have, the better.
Brilliant. And how do you get a hedge to grow when you get 70-mile-per-hour winds?
Yeah, difficult. If it's coastal, you'll need to find out the species that are suitable to coastal and that are more tolerant of salt water and spray and things like that. But it is difficult. I'd say that the best thing is to have a look around you and see what's there already. And generally speaking, whatever type of hedgerows are there for the last 50 or 100 years are the ones that are gonna survive there. That's what I would say.
Brilliant. And just another question about species. For the mixed species swards, what is a good makeup of species for dairy herd grazing and also silage ground that's away from the home block?
Yeah, good question. The jury is out, I'm afraid, because they've research done here on beef and sheep, and it's hugely impressive. It outperformed perennial ryegrass sward, no end. Dairy is different. We have a mix in that habitat management guidelines, but it's more to do with biodiversity, and I suppose you have to put a value on if it's going to take out nitrogen. That's a huge plus. But if you put in the recommendation is Timothy, perennial ryegrass, red and white clover, chicory, plantain. They're the basics. If you add cocksfoot, it's not as palatable a grass, but it's a very good for biodiversity, because it's these tussocks that have beetles and all sorts of things down in the root system. But yeah, the 3 or 4 species and the red and white clover and the chicory and the plantain, that would be a minimum. And you have to look at it from a dairy cow's point of view. She's getting 7 or 8 different sources of forage, 7 or 8 different planes of nutrition, 7 or 8 species that are going down different levels in the soil, bringing up different nutrients. So it's bound to be, in my opinion anyway, better than just one species. If all your eggs are in the one basket with perennial ryegrass, there's going to be deficiencies. You're going to have to feed more minerals. There's also supposed to be anthelmintic benefits with chicory. And actually, in my own situation, only there last week, we had calves that are still outdoors feeding on a chicory sward, and they were coughing. And I said, is this really true now that it doesn't seem to be holding up? That it was preventing parasites, or it was killing parasites. But I got the samples tested, and there was no stomach worms whatsoever in the sample, and the fecal sample doesn't test for lungworm. It's not accurate, but it appears there was no stomach worms. And at this time of the year, that's, you know, that's amazing, because this is the time of the year when they're really heavy. So they're going into the shade clean, and they don't need, they do probably need, they were coughing, so they probably had hooves, and I did dose them, but they didn't have stomach worms, which is a positive.
Yes, no, that's great. And I think this will be our final question to wrap up the evening. What effect have the changes had on the stocking rates of the farms within the group for your Bride project?
None really, because we didn't ever say to them that you need to drop stock. We didn't say that you need to drop fertilizer. We you know, that's up to themselves. If they're the guys that are really low in space for nature, it's more a policy issue, because we can pay them for 2 or 3 years, but as I said already, it's gone in 2023, so they're not going to drop their stock while they're in the Bride project and then realize that they need to increase it again and take out whatever things they're after putting in. So it didn't affect the stocking rate. But you know, in the example I gave, where if you put in a biodiversity plot, you know, and you're stocked at a cow to the acre, well, if you put in an acre, you know, you just take out a cow. So if you have 100 cows, just keep 99 next year and put in a biodiversity plot.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Donal, for a very informative evening. That was brilliant to listen to, and great to hear what you've been up to in the Bride project over in Ireland. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Cara. Thanks, everybody. If you're still listening, thank you very much.